Greetings, I'm Bentley Bryant, and today I'd like to welcome you to werewolves.com. Today I will be reading from my After Midnight Short Tales stories. We'll get started today with one that's near and dear to my heart, Convict 769-17201. Each year there are hundreds of unexplained deaths that occur within the prison system, most of which are never reported to the media or anyone outside the system due to the bizarre circumstances surrounding each incident, or the strange and terrifying occurrences afterwards. It was a cold Monday morning. Extremely cold for October in Arizona. Tom Huntsberry, a new corrections officer with Deep Canyon State Prison in Solar, Arizona, was too excited to notice the weather. It would be his first day at his new job on his new post. Since the weather was a lot colder than expected, Tom figured he should start up his old Ford truck to let it warm up a bit before he headed out to work. He was an early bird by nature, but today he was up and moving a lot earlier than most. His wife and 7-month-old baby girl were both sound asleep as he anxiously moved around in preparation for his big day. With his truck running, Tom hurried back inside to make sure all of his gear was packed and ready. He grabbed his duty belt, a necessity for any CO to have, especially as a new boot, a nickname given to every newbie that made it through the grueling 15-week correctional officer training. Tom graduated at the top of his class, and although he was going in today on first shift, he was already slated to go to third shift after a month or so of additional training on the job. Funny how the graveyard shift had a different meaning at this particular prison. Tom, now all geared up and ready to head out, stopped by the bedroom where he kissed his wife on the cheek. She was still resting peacefully and he didn't want to wake her, so he checked the baby monitor and backed quietly out into the hallway. The baby's room, which was across the hallway, was nice and warm. She was his and his wife's pride and joy. Tom was glad that he could help to take care of her now even better. He had been in the Army for 2 years when he and Esmeralda became pregnant. It was their plan for Tom to have a career in the Army, but a leg injury he sustained during his career overseas assignment ended their Army dreams. The Army was gracious enough to pay for his occupational therapy program, which helped him move towards a full recovery. Unless he spoke of his injury, no one would ever notice, and Tom was quite happy about that. As he reflected, he leaned over and gently kissed Lacey on her forehead. He left her room, grabbed his gear, and made one last stop by the fridge to grab his lunch. He stepped outside this time and noticed the bitter cold weather that met him on his porch. He locked the door and headed for his truck. The drive to DCSP was at least an hour, and he had to be there, checked in, and ready to attend the daily briefing by 6 a.m. He headed out around 4:30 a.m. to give himself more than enough time to get there early. After driving for a few minutes, Tom noticed that his radio was on, but there was no sound coming from his speakers. Not even a hum. He loved country music and was known on occasion to blast it as loud as the speakers would allow before distorting. Not today, though. First the temperature, now this. Tom tried to find another station, anything but the silence, to help calm down some of his first day jitters. Nothing. Jeez Louise, did all 3 stations in Solar freeze overnight? He remained focused as he traveled on to work. Deep Canyon State Prison was located in the middle of nowhere. This was the norm for prisons in the area because there was always the unspoken fear of an escape. Having DCSP located in the middle of Nowheresville was a great idea due to the fact that every convict there was responsible for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of several people. Shockingly, a lot of the cases happened after the convicts were locked away at DCSP. It was a really dark place full of evil that had no limits. But it attracted people who loved money and benefits. It was the highest paying gig in the entire area, and the benefits were better than any Tom ever had. With his wife Esmeralda being homebound after an emergency C-section, the offer came at a perfect time, offering to pay him triple what he made in the Army, and that was an attractive offer. One that Tom would have been crazy to refuse, or so it seemed. As he pulled his old truck up to the front gate, an older CO stepped out to greet him. "Morning." "Howdy," Tom responded. "You're one of the new boots, aren't you? Do you have any drugs, weapons, alcohol, $100 or more in cash, or any other items that would be considered prohibited on the premises?" asked the front gate CO. Although Tom had grown accustomed to the line of questioning over the past few weeks, he swore that there were at least 2 items added to that never-ending list every time he passed through the front gate. He answered no. To answer anything other than no meant that you would have to park your vehicle alongside the road that led up to the front gate, which meant a 100-yard walk back to the front gate. Most of the DCSP employees lied to avoid that walk back. As Tom pulled into a parking space close to the front entrance, he took a minute to reflect on all of the training he had received over the past few weeks. One of the most valuable lessons learned was not to become complacent in this environment. It could instantly be the death of you. No warning, no visible signs, just death. Instantly. It was said that one of his instructors who had survived DCSP for the past 11 years always noted, if the hairs on the back of your neck don't stand up when you first arrive here for your shift, you probably need to find a different line of work. Tom said a prayer, grabbed his gear, his lunch, secured his truck, double-checked it, and headed for the front door. He was greeted in the front lobby by a third shift CO who looked like she could use a very strong cup of coffee and a couple of toothpicks to help keep her eyes open. "You're early." Tom looked up at the clock. He had about 30 minutes before he would need to be in the briefing room. Clearing the front lobby alone could take 15 minutes depending on how thorough the front lobby officer was. Navigating through here was very much like maneuvering through the security checkpoint at any airport. No matter how thorough, though, it never seemed to stop the influx of contraband that flooded this and every other prison on the planet. Funny how 98.9% of the contraband came in through the front lobby, and dirty staff found all kinds of ways, innovative ways, to get it through. Like the nurse who was fired just as Tom was hired. She would mix narcotics and other various drugs in her food, bring it in, and break it down for distribution during her nightly medic runs. The meds were distributed right under the noses of escorting COs to numerous convicts who had submitted fraudulent sick call slips the day before. Nurse Goody Goods, as she was known amongst the convicts, was taking care she was taken care of with her special meds. Thankfully, the front lobby officer was in the middle of a phone call that must have been more important than slowing Tom down as he cleared the front lobby. It took all of 5 minutes and Tom was on his way to the briefing room, which on a bad day could take an additional 15 or 20 minutes. There were 5 electric gates separating the briefing room from the back door of the front lobby. This was because convict workers were always out and about during the first and second shifts. With so many gates, it deterred any of them from thinking that one day they could make a run for it. The fact that they all were operated by central control officers was even more of a deterrent, since CC officers could see you, but they were in a complex too far away to be seen. Today, central control was being nice and simultaneously opened each gate in unison. Tom was sure that this was against policy, but he was not complaining. He hurried through the open gates and found himself walking into the briefing room about 5:40 a.m. To his surprise, there were several COs. Already in the briefing room, laughing and talking. Mostly old-timers who had been with DCSP since it opened over 20 years ago. Who could do this job on that level for so many years? As he entered, all of the COs stopped talking and just stared at him. Awkward. Tom made his way over to an empty corner of the room. Once there, he was approached by a CO gripping a huge mug of coffee, like his life depended on it. He extended his hand and said, "Name's Stevens. You must be the new boot who's gonna shadow me today. I hope you can keep up." Tom fought laughing out loud and insulting the old man, Stevens, who was a frail little guy, at least old enough to be Tom's grandpa. Never mind the fact that Tom was at least twice his size. Suddenly the room erupted with laughter. Tom laughed too, nervously. His hand met CO Stevens and he said, "I'll do my best, sir." In all seriousness, Tom later found out that CO Stevens may not have been joking about keeping up with him after all. A few weeks earlier, he had been kicked out of one of the lockdown units and suspended for breaking a convict's arm. Tom would also notice the eagle, anchor, and earth tattoo along with the word Semper Fi on his right forearm later. No, he was probably not joking at all. After the ice-breaking moment, everyone went back to talking to each other as COs began to enter the briefing room. Tom started to wonder if he'd missed the memo on bringing in lunch for the shift. Everyone's lunch container was larger than his gear bag. Were these people planning to stay for a few days before returning home, Tom thought? Maybe first shift was having potluck or something. Seriously. At 5:58 a.m., a burly, mean-looking captain walked in along with a mousy-looking lieutenant. The room felt even more silent than when Tom had entered, which made him a bit more nervous than he already had become. The captain, who Tom figured was a woman who had spent too many years in this line of work, first looked around the room with a very grim look. She then yelled, "Give me 4 lines across the front. Fall in." The COs, even CO Stevens, scrambled to form what the captain had requested. Like clockwork, the lieutenant grabbed his radio and told Central Control not to open the briefing room door for any late COs. The captain looked over and said, "Anybody who is late today will have to deal with me." With the way most everyone dragged in, Tom was sure there would be at least 2 or 3 late birds. He was glad he would not be anywhere near that butt-chewing session. All right, listen up, growled the captain. Yesterday during the 1 a.m. count, convict 769-17201 was found beaten beyond recognition in his cell. His cell was in D building, B pod, cell B15 to be specific, a cell that convict 769-17201 had spent the past 17 years in for unspeakable crimes committed against several victims. Now Tom wondered if a few of the COs were even breathing because they were so silent. The captain went on to say that a full-scale investigation was taking place and that the entire pod was off limits to anyone not on the investigation team. The other 48 convicts from B pod had been dispersed mostly to the lockdown units. Normally it would have been 49, but convict 769-17201 did not have a cellmate. It was rumored that he was one of the top leaders amongst the convicts, therefore no other convict was worthy of sharing a cell with him. The fact that he did not have a cellie calls for even more concern since he was locked down in his cell alone at 10 p.m. and the door had not been reopened until his brutally beaten body was discovered at 1 a.m. Further investigation revealed that the CO who found him last saw him sitting on his bunk reading a book during the 11 p.m. count. One of the things that stuck out in the mind of Tom Huntsberry was the fact that DCSP prided themselves in fast and accurate counts, and there were a lot of them conducted throughout every shift. The captain went on to say that the entire building was due for renovation, so the rest of the convicts in the building, 250 total, would be out by the end of the week. Shortly after telling everyone their post assignments, the captain ended the briefing by telling everyone to stay on their toes and to watch each other's backs around these convicts. At that point in unison, the COs yelled, "One team, one fight," and left for their various posts. On his way out of the briefing room, the lieutenant stopped Tom and shook his hand. "Welcome aboard, CO Huntsberry. Sorry your exciting first day got downplayed by a dead convict, but we're happy to have you become part of our team." Tom felt that the lieutenant's words were sincere, but the look in the lieutenant's eyes seemed to scream, "Go back home. This place is crazy and getting worse by the minute." Tom replied, "Thank you, sir. I look forward to being an asset on the team." With that, he took off to catch his partner, CO Stevens. They had been assigned to C building, and to get there you had to walk past D building. As both men did so, CO Stevens took a long sip from his coffee mug. "I'll bet you $20 it was an inside job." Tom wasn't quite sure what CO Stevens meant by his comment, so he remained silent as both men kept walking by and staring at D building. Tom could not help but wonder what it would be like to go in and check out the pod. Heck, even the thought of taking a peek into the cell excited him. He would have his chance to do just that a week from today. On Friday, a week after convict 769-17201 had been found, CO Huntsberry was notified that he would be one of the COs going to third shift to fill in for several COs who had either been fired or quit. It was a total of 9 to be exact, all of whom had worked in D building since 76's, the convict's former nickname, death. CO Huntsberry did not want his wife to worry too much about his new profession, so he refrained from telling her about 76 or what had happened to him. He most certainly did not mention the fact that he was being reassigned to the graveyard shift due to 9 COs quitting. Then he would have to explain the 76 ordeal. He just told her what he was told. It was for additional training to help expedite your promotion opportunities here at DCSP. Having had a great first week and not taking crap from any of the convicts there, he actually thought he could promote rather quickly. Besides, the fallen officers had not reported back to work for their shift, and no one had heard from them. How then could anyone conclude that all of their departures had anything to do with D Building or Convict 76? It was Tom's first night on the graves. As he exited the front lobby headed towards the briefing room, there was quite a few oddities about third shift that did not sit well with CO Huntsberry. The fact that there were only about 10 COs and one shift supervisor for the night ride bothered him the most. This was in comparison to 35 or 40 COs, both on first and second shifts. Even though the convicts were locked down throughout the graveyard shift, there was always a chance that something could kick off. If that happened, the COs, most of whom were tired from working day jobs or going to school for full time, would be severely outnumbered. CO Huntsberry also noted that there were no attaboy get out there and crack some convict skulls briefings on graves either. You were told your post assignment in the front lobby, and you left from there to secure your post from a very weary second shift officer who seemed to be allergic to being in a prison after dark. Tonight he would be assigned as a utility officer. Utility Officer 2, a coveted post for COs for all shifts prior to the death of 76. Utility officers were responsible for passing out and picking up count sheets to all of the units at DCSP. The two COs were also responsible for checking all empty buildings to ensure that they were empty of convicts possibly hiding out in preparation of escaping DCSP. It was one of the most important jobs of the utility officers, so much so that it was rumored that 3 of the 9 officers were fired due to the refusal to check D Building. The truth of the matter was, only one of the COs refused to check D Building, and he was fired per DCSP policy. The other 2 COs on separate occasions claimed that when they checked D Building, they saw movement in B Pod. Regardless of what they did or did not see, neither returned after their visit to D Building. CO Huntsberry's partner, Utility Officer 1, met with him in the briefing room to discuss their roles for the evening. He was a little nervous about his UO2 spot since he had not filled that position before. UO1 told him that he would take the 10 p.m. count while CO Huntsberry did the outer fence checks. The plan was to switch positions at the 1 a.m. count. The night was progressing rather quickly. The 10 p.m. count was conducted as planned, and as the count was cleared by Central Control, the 2 COs met up to discuss and finalize the game plan for the rest of the shift. As they talked, CO Huntsberry noticed his fellow CO seemed to be holding his stomach and grimacing every few seconds. He asked him if he was okay, and UO1 nodded his head. Not convinced, Huntsberry advised the CO to stop by medical. The CO insisted that he would be okay. He added that a foul smell in D Building made both his head and stomach hurt. Tom now wondered if there was any truth to all of the rumors surrounding D Building. His partner was in perfect health less than 2 hours ago. Now he was sweaty and cold and could barely stand on his own. The CO reluctantly allowed Tom to escort him down to medical, where a nurse immediately began to check his vitals. Since there were several UO tasks left to be done, Tom took off so that they would not fall too far behind. Almost 30 minutes later, while completing interfence checks, he noticed an ambulance racing towards the facility. He switched on his radio to channel 21 and called for Central Control. One of the officers responded, "Go ahead." And when he asked, what was going on, he was informed that his partner, UO1's condition had worsened and he was being rushed to the emergency room outside of the prison. Tom's heart, with that news, sank in his chest.